So I'm going to be talking about anatomy with my class. And last time we talked about the spinal nerves and how there's 31 pairs of them and how they come out of the holes in your vertebra. And today I'm going to start moving into basic brain anatomy with my class. And so the way that we're going to do it is we're going to go from the bottom of the brain, where the brain connects to the spinal cord. We're just going to move up. And as we move up, we're going to kind of get a little bit more complex, and we're going to see features about the brain that maybe aren't present in lower organisms. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be this idea that we have a brainstem and there's a thickening of the spinal cord as it goes up into the brain, and that the brainstem is the lower down area that used to be part of this neural tube in development, and this becomes what we call the medulla. And this is part of the hindbrain or the lower brain, and the medulla, all it does is it basically does survival. So heart rate, it does breathing, these things that we think of as we couldn't live without them. So we're not doing poetry down there in the medulla, we're doing basic instincts. So if you have damage to your medulla, this is usually a really bad sign, like you're going to need to be on a respirator, ventilator in the hospital. And so then after we have those basics down, we're going to kind of go up and talk about this area called the pons. So the pons is right up above, and the pons starts to be where our sensory information gets integrated. So we also have this area called the cerebellum that is right on the back of our head. That's considered part of the brainstem as well, with these other two regions. And the brainstem then consists of base body functions. It consists of the pons, where we start to actually have information start to get processed. And then we've got the cerebellum, which is responsible for the intent of motor movement. So it's got about half the neurons in our brain are located back there in the cerebellum. And this is about movement, and not specifically like the initiation of movement as much as just monitoring where our bodies are in space at any given time, and coordinating, am I on track to be exactly where I want to be? So this idea of when you take intoxication test, if you get pulled over and a police officer thinks you might be inebriated, doing this, so kind of tracking where your finger is, knowing where you are in space and what you're about to do, coordination, and then having feedback that goes back to make sure that you're where you're supposed to be. That's the cerebellum. So the other thing that we're going to talk about today in class is this idea of cranial nerves. So there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So the spinal nerves bring in all the sensory information from your body, and it sends out all the motor information to tell your body what to do. However, you also need to do these kinds of things about the brain. So the brain has lots of muscles that it innervates in the head, and you need to bring in sensory information from your head. So you've got 12 pairs of cranial nerves that start all the way by bringing in olfactory or sensory information from your nose. And all it goes through your eyes to bring in vision, and then there's actually 3 devoted to actually making sure that your muscles in your eyes are making your eyes move at the same time, so you can track things that are like running across your visual field. And then we've got some that do auditory information and just where you kind of are in terms of balance. And then you've got a bunch that do the like muscles around your face and in your neck and in your swallowing. And then we've got sensation as well. And altogether, these make your 12 cranial nerves, and they can only go in and out of various places. So they're actually holes in your cranium that they exit and enter. And then the last thing we're going to talk about today is this idea of the meninges. So there is a cushion around your entire brain called the meninges that is basically like a protective barrier. And the meninges is filled with cerebral spinal fluid. So it is kind of like a bath that's bathing the brain all the time, so that it provides some extra cushioning. It's inside it, it's outside. And so kind of sitting in there. And so if you have something like a concussion and you get hit in the front of your head, what's going to happen is you might get brain injury to the front area, but because your brain is actually in liquid, it'll slosh sometimes and hit the back of your head. And when that happens, you can get head injury in the back as well, because your brain will kind of bump back and forth. So the meninges can become inflamed. So if you have meningitis, that is the infection of the meninges, or this like protective casing around your brain. And if you ever have something like a spinal tap done, that is where they're going in and taking a little bit of that cerebral spinal fluid, because it's not just in the brain, but it's all the way bathing the spinal cord all the way down. So these are just some kind of basics to know in terms of organization of the brain. So starting from how the spinal cord works, and we're going to go up. Now we've talked about the brainstem, and then we're going to go into kind of the midbrain next, and then we're going to talk about the upper layers. So a lot of us as parents are interested in, hey, how do those upper layers work? So the parts that make us kind of human, the attention, the reasoning, the judgment. And so we will get there, but it's important to know that the entire nervous system is organized according to basic principles that don't change no matter what brain area you're in. And so I'm going lowest to highest. Thanks for listening. Wish me luck on my lecture today. Join us every day in May for a new video.